I'm of the opinion with the Detroit Lions that this has to be the year for them to win the Super Bowl if they really have aspirations of doing it. Not only because the roster that they have constructed features a quarterback that is the second highest paid player in NFL history, but also because they have the perfect mix of young skill players and veteran guys who are looking to contribute to a Super Bowl winning team. Not only this, but I think the Detroit Lions, maybe more than any other team in the NFL right now, have a fan base that is A, supportive, but also B, could probably be pretty crushing just when you think about the weight of carrying an entire city like Detroit's fan base. It's now or never for Detroit because if you look at their history, it could be never again for 30 plus more years for the Detroit Lions and their fan base. But let's not be so negative. Let's talk about the positives for the Detroit Lions. They have the team of the NFC North. And not only do they have the team of the NFC North, they have the team that can contend with the Niners, the Eagles, anybody else in the NFC that you want to say are the teams to compete for not only the NFC but for the Super Bowl. Let's start with the offensive side of the ball. You struggled to find anything offensively last year where they didn't only excel, but they were even average at. They were in top 5 when you look at rushing yards, passing touchdowns. Jared Goff threw 12 interceptions. That's not the worst thing in the world. Middle of the pack. You could cut it down a little bit, but that's how this Detroit team plays. They're going to be pedal to the metal most of the game, if not all of the game. And when you do play like that, you're going to have interceptions. You're going to have turnovers. The defense, however, was obviously the main issue for this team. If you look at advanced statistics for this team, it would say that the defense was the main reason that this team lost 5 games in the regular season, and it was by far the main reason that they lost in the NFC Championship against the San Francisco 49ers. So what did they do in the offseason to not only, I don't want to say stay the same as an offense, but at least be able to recontribute a overwhelmingly positive team on the offensive side of the ball? If you do want to start with what they lost in the offseason, I'd say it's minimal compared to what they did additionally to their team. They lose Jonah Jackson, who was a very major piece on their offensive line. He played 12 games last year and played in 2 of the 3 playoff games for Detroit, but he did not play in that NFC Championship game. Jonah Jackson, if you look at the games, in 4 of the 5 games that he did not play, they had their lowest rushing totals on the season. And if you take out the game where they had 220 yards rushing, average-wise they were, I believe, below 70 yards rushing without Jonah Jackson in the lineup. So you lose him, but you do add Kevin Zeitler from the Baltimore Ravens, who is someone who throughout his career has been very positive in contributing to not only a good run offense, but a very good pass protecting offensive line as well. CJ Gardner-Johnson is also a loss for this team. He's not as much of a loss production-wise as much as he is as you kind of wish you could have seen what this defense would have looked like if he could have been healthy for at least half of the year last year. He played in 3 games in total. I really struggled to remember a single play where I even saw CJ Gardner-Johnson on the field with the Detroit Lions. And it's also sad to see, you wish you could have seen this team at full strength with Brian Branch, CJ Gardner-Johnson on the back end. You add Terrion Arnold in the secondary as well through the draft. As well as Ennis Rakestraw as well in the second round. You really wish you could have seen this secondary with CJ Gardner-Johnson, but it is what it is. The Detroit Lions also lost Josh Reynolds in the offseason, and as much as that sucks for Detroit, I think I think the fans of the Detroit Lions liked Josh Reynolds. I think people around the league think Josh Reynolds is a good player. He caught 40 passes for them last year. He was the 3rd leading receiver on this team. I think you replace the snaps of Josh Reynolds with Jamison Williams, you'll be in the same exact spot, if not in a more explosive spot than you were last year. Now, while Detroit did make additions to their secondary with Terrion Arnold and with Ennis Rakestraw in the draft, they also made a pretty big addition in free agency for this defense in adding guys like DJ Reader, Amik Robertson, and Marcus Davenport to this defense. Now, Davenport and Robertson are total prove-it players at this point. I like Amik Robertson a lot. I think he can be a very solid piece in a secondary. He obviously can't be your number one shutdown corner. He can't do that, but he can be a solid piece. DJ Reader might be towards the end of his prime, but he is a very valuable run stopper and pass rusher, albeit, he's not going to be your, Aaron Donald type guy at the defensive tackle position, but you don't need him to be. If you put him on a defense with Aiden Hutchinson and the rest of the guys that are on this Detroit Lions defensive line, including Marcus Davenport, who you bring over from Minnesota, this is a pretty boom or bust team on the defensive line. And DJ Reader can be a guy who can bring consistency to a boom or bust defensive line. And that's what they're going to need, especially when you're looking to stop the run. Now, let's look at the schedule for Detroit. I don't like it. If I'm a Detroit fan. I hate it. I don't get why the NFL does this to their teams where they have anybody. I don't care who it is. I don't get why we have a bye week pre-week 8 or 7 at the earliest. Why are we having a team have a bye week after 4 games? Especially when 3 of those 4 games are at home. I don't really get it. You follow the bye week with 5 of 7 games on the road, and then you end the year with the Bears, Packers, Bills, at Bears, at Niners, and against the Vikings. You're talking about a stretch for Detroit where if 3 or 4 games go wrong, you're looking at a team that if Green Bay can keep up with what they did last year, if Chicago can play better than last year with the number 1 overall pick playing at quarterback, if Minnesota can just be, I don't know, they're going to win like 4 or 5 games with J.J. McCarthy at QB. But one of those games, if you're Detroit, you can't have one of those games be against you. That counts as 2 losses if Minnesota beats you. So I hate Detroit's schedule. I still think, obviously, double-digit wins is pretty attainable, especially in a 17-game season. But it's going to be tough. And tough is exactly what this Detroit team thrives in. But at a certain point, it's been pretty tough for this team for about 2 or 3 years in a row now. So, at a certain point, is this team going to crack? Is Jared Goff going to revert back to being a average at best quarterback? Or is he going to stay a top 8, top 7 type quarterback? I don't know. If he stays top 7, top 8, this team is winning 13 games next year because they made the improvements that they needed to. If they aren't able to keep up with what they've been, they're still going to have a winning record. They're still going to probably make the playoffs. They're still probably going to make a 10-win season pretty attainable. And I would say 10 wins is probably the floor for this team. I would say the ceiling is 14. But again, it's going to be a tough season because it takes 3 or 4, if you're very unlucky, 5 games where, you get set back very far. I'll just finish with this. I think Detroit is they're pretty geared up for another season. I think they look at how last year ended, and they're happy with where they got to. They're not happy that that's how far they made it. And this is a pretty big season for Detroit. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if this is the best it can get for Detroit, that seems like a scary nightmare to me. And you don't want to have this be the peak. You want the peak to be a Super Bowl. And this is the year that they have to do it.